Okay, so hello everyone. Aap sabhi ko pranam. My name is Abhishek Srivastava. I'm an architect and designer from background, and I've been in both roles as a design educator and a design professional. And currently, I'm a research scholar at IIT Roorkee. And I'm going to present a paper on learning through conversations, the Rishi way. Now, I think the illustration helps you connect and imagine the scenario which I'm going to talk about. It relates much to the ancient India. So when we talk about ancient India and the education system in ancient India, it's important that we acknowledge the fact that ancient India was one of the topmost learning centers wherein scholars from across the globe used to come to study from the Indian teachers who were basically Rishis, also called as sages. Because these were dhoti-clad scientists, I would rather say. And it is surprising to see the kind of diverse subjects that were taught in that time that included mathematics, astronomy, arts, architecture, grammar, medicine. And these are all taught by Rishis who were like Brahmagupta, Markandeya, Chanakya, Panini, Charak, Sushrut. And in the universities and gurukuls like Takshila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, and Sharada Peeth. Now, when we are talking about the ancient Indian education system, it's also important to talk about the Guru Shishya Parampara, also called as the teacher-student tradition. Now, if we ponder upon the term Guru, the word Guru means it's a combination of Gu and Ru, which means darkness to lightness. So the one who takes a learner from the darkness or from the state of ignorance and blindness to the state of enlightenment and wisdom is somebody who would be called as Guru. So that's why the gurus were given a very prominent and a prestigious position in the society. And I have specifically in the whole presentation used the term learner instead of students, because at that time, even the villagers, the students, and the kings as well were basically learners. They would go to the Rishi to seek their redressal to the problems. Now, Guru Shishya Parampara was a very sacred tradition at that time. And the learner would basically reside with the Guru, unlike in the modern times where they are staying in the campuses, but there they would stay with the Guru, and the Guru would take care of the learner like their own child. So the learner would actually see their Guru, throughout the day and night. And it was not just the classes from which they used to got educated, but also from the lifestyle of the Guru by which along with him they were staying with. Now, if we talk about the current day struggle, now what happened in the pandemic was that we quickly switched our modes. We went from physical to online, and then going forward with the hybrid one, wherein we had a mixed kind of mode. And probably that helped us in a certain way. It helped in terms of the benefits of digital learning as well as face-to-face learning, as well as to switch into an appropriate mode depending upon the kind of situation we are in. But the very important aspect of any kind of learning environment is how well engaged the learners are in that particular environment. And if there are low engagement levels, that will lead to the lesser understanding in the learners, which will further lead to increased absenteeism in the class. So they would not probably attend the classes as well. So hence, one of the key contributors to a good classroom, I would rather say, is the kind of engagement we are having in the class, the kind of interaction we are having in the class. Now, when we talk about conversation, Jay Cross has said a very interesting statement saying that conversation is the most powerful learning technology ever invented. He's author of the book Informal Learning. And if we try and see our childhood, we would see, and if we have children nearby, we can actually see the kind of questioning they have. They would ask questions and back-to-back questions about why it is, how it is, when it is happening. But down the line, when we go further with education, probably this questioning curtails. Probably when in the childhood we are asking 10 to 15 questions, down the line in our higher education, probably that reduces to 1 or 2. But at the same time, what we are trying to say is that the conversations has become a very important tool in terms of engagement, in terms of interaction, and in terms of having a fluid kind of a learning approach. Now, George, who is a German philosopher, he also said a very interesting aspect about conversation, that a genuine conversation is never the one that we wanted to conduct, more correct to say that we fall into a conversation, and a conversation has a spirit of its own. So when I was talking about conversation being fluid, it is primarily that only, that conversation does not have any boundaries. Conversation does not has any limits of a domain, but it goes across, it goes, because it has a fluid nature of its own. We can touch upon multiple points, we can touch upon multidisciplinary points in that sense. When we talk about ancient India, the teaching methods in ancient India were very diverse. Some of them are still being practiced with a different terminology, obviously. So like we had Anukaran, Punaravritti, which is the imitation and repetition method, the Prashnottar Vidhi, which is the question and answer method, Swadhyay, which is the self-study, Brahman Vidhi, which is the touring method, Katha Kathan Vidhi, which is the storytelling method, Tark Vidhi, and likewise. Now, what we see is that there was an emphasis given on the oral traditions, and conversation was much more dominant in certain teaching methodologies, for which one of the most evident was the Prashnottar Vidhi, also known as the question and answer method. So, going forward in the presentation, I would be presenting three evidences from the ancient Indian scriptures. These are basically about the conversations between two people. One would be the teacher, this other would be a learner. And we would try to see that, what is happening in those conversations and how the Rishis were able to mold the conversation in a way so that, there was always an added learning attribute in their conversation. So the first conversation is between Rishi Markandeya and King Vajra, where the king is asking the Rishi on how to build a statue. So he's basically seeking, he wants to build a statue of a god, and he wants to know that, how do we go about building a statue? Now, this whole conversation is documented in Vishnu Dharmutram Puran within the Chitrasut part of it. This is the Sanskrit transcript. I would switch to the English one, and wherein he asks that, okay, teach me the principles of statue building. To which Rishi says that, one who does not know the art of sketching cannot understand the art of statue building. To which he further questions that, okay, teach me sketching. To which he asks that, okay, before sketching, you must be aware of the body forms, you must be aware of the dance forms, hence you must be aware of the Nritya Kala, which is the dance forms of it. So he said, okay, please teach me dancing. To which he further says that, okay, because dancing is based on the beats and the musical instruments, you must be aware of that. And further, he says that, musical instruments needs to be learned only when you have a basic background of the Geet, which is the singing, and the prose and the verses, which is the Gadya and the Padya. Now, if we zoom out this whole conversation, we would see that, what he's talking about is a interdisciplinary form of education, interdisciplinary approach of a holistic learning. So there are two aspects for which each evidence has been, valued upon, which is the query resolution. So what was the primary query which was being answered? At the same time, what is the added learning attribute which is evident in this particular conversation? And in this particular aspect, it is about having an interdisciplinary form of education. And that is also evident in our National Education Policy 2020, which is being in a phase of implementation. Going to our second evidence, this is a conversation between Rishi Yayyavalkya and King Janaka. This is documented in the Vangme by Sri Ram Sharma Acharya. And this conversation is about how to perform yajna when you do not have certain samagris or you have certain constraints. Now, before I get into this conversation, let me just briefly talk about what yajna is. So if you see this particular image, it's basically it's a fire ritual wherein you offer certain samagris and samhitas while in chanting mantras. Now, this might appear a ritualistic activity, but actually there is a whole science behind it. And there are scientific experimentation being done in terms of assessing the kind of impact it has on lowering the electromagnetic radiations, lowering the pollutants, as well as there is a separate healing methods of yajnopathy, which is basically healing through yajnas. So coming back to the conversation, he asks that how to perform yajna if one does not have samagri, which is one of the key components. So he says that, okay, if you do not have samagri, you use grains. Then he says that if you do not have grains, what to use? You use plants and vegetation in a dried form, obviously. And then he says that if there are no plants and vegetation, then he may use wood. And the question comes in, what if there is no fire? Because it is a fire offering. So he says that then also you can do a symbolic havan, wherein you use your feelings as samagri into an imaginary fire. Now, if we see this whole conversation, the primary question was how to perform again hypothetical scenarios in terms of constraints. But what we are also looking at the aspect of is a creative outlook with a solution-based mindset. And I think probably we all will agree that designers or any other profession which we see around, we need that kind of mindset. We need that kind of creative approach wherein the constraints does not become barrier in our progress, and we have to consistently look forward with a solution based mindset in terms of how we can overcome those kinds of obstructions. Coming to the third and final conversation, now this is between the Valakilya Rishis and a group of Rishis. Now here there is a guy called Kavasha, and he is basically son of a slave. So there were certain Rishis who were performing yagya, and he wanted to join them. So he reached out to them and he said that, okay, can I attend? Can I also sit with you in terms of performing that yagya? To which those group of Rishis said that, we are high born Brahmins and you are son of a slave. You cannot participate. And but Kavash was well versed with the Vedic lore and Shastras. So through his mystic powers, he was able to change the course of a river which was flowing nearby. And when they looked at this particular act, from a miracle perspective, they realized that, okay, this person has a certain extraordinary merit and exceptional talent. So they reached out to him and said that, okay, please enlighten us more. Please tell us more about what is the true knowledge. To which he says that, he did not answer to himself. He said that he referred it to another set of educator, probably we can say, to Valakilya Rishis, that you reach out to them, you would found them in the Namish, it's a place in Uttar Pradesh, and they would be able to guide you. So when they reached there to the Valakilya Rishis, they answered to their question in a very interesting way. They said that just as a chariot is just a piece of wood and metal without a driver, it cannot go anywhere. So is the body just a corpse without the Atma, which is the soul, which keeps it alive. So body will never be higher than the Atma, and everybody has that Atma inside us. Everybody has that soul inside us. So there is no supreme in terms of human beings. We all are same. We all have the same soul. Now, if we look at this particular example, the two things which are very exceptional in this is, first is that many a times, we can actually refer to a person who has much more better understanding of a subject. So here also we can see that evident that, the Kavasha referred to a certain set of educators that, okay, there you go, they would be able to address your query in a much better way. And the second aspect is the kind of contextual example which is given. So this is a period where the king used to travel with the chariot, and probably it was much more better in terms of an example, because it was much more of a relatable example. People can understand, there is a chariot, there is wood, there's metal involved into it. So when we are looking at this conversation, the query is who is superior and what is true knowledge, but the added learning attribute which we see is learning through relatable and simpler examples. And I think that becomes very much important and significant when we are having a diverse group of students in our classes with different and varied background, wherein these kind of examples can really help us, in terms of the engagement and interaction in the classes. So if we see the comprehensive look at all these examples, we can realize that, there was a constant questioning involved. The teacher was not saying that, okay, let us now conclude, we have asked a lot of questions, but there is always a consistent to and fro happening. So there is a curiosity among the learner, and there is the patience in the teacher, which keeps on this kind of conversation, and they are giving the answer to the problem, but at the same time with the underlying aspect of added learning attribute. So if we try and conclude this presentation, as a teacher, we can say that, the teacher needs to be patient, calm, and should promote inquiry. Should not be dismissive about the questions. We should try and promote. I think yesterday also we had a couple of presentations which talked in a similar way. Professor Yusuf and Pavanji also talked about the same. We should try not only answer questions, but also try to inculcate certain values, certain aspects, certain skill sets through our conversations. And it's a two-way exercise. So the students also need to pursue with certain things. They need to be active listener. They need to be curious in terms of questioning. They should not have the let go attitude. Okay, one question I have asked, it is enough for the class. So if there is certain trouble, certain doubt, they should always go for it. So finally, how can we start as a teacher? How can we start this conversational learning? We can start by building opportunities to talk and conversate with our learners. We need to visualize how our topics link with the other subjects. So for example, in design, there are many different subjects going in parallel. Now, we should always think that how our subject can link with the other subjects so that it becomes a holistic learning for the learner. We can start with documenting our conversations, and because the moment we start documenting, we'll be able to see and analyze that, okay, probably if we try and bring those aspects, it will link better with the other subjects. So slowly we can integrate this practice in our methodology of teaching. Uh, like I said, contextualizing conversation is always good with respect to varied learners, and we should always try to guide by an explorative way rather than a yes, no, or a binary response mechanism. So I would like to end the presentation with this particular quote. वार्तालाप जीव का उच्चारण नहीं, उसके पीछे मनुष्य का निजी दृष्टिकोण, व्यक्तित्व, स्वभाव, अभ्यास, अनुभव आदि जुड़ा होता है. Conversation is not the utterance of tongue. Behind it is an individual's personal vision, personality, character, thinking, temperament, practice, experience, and a lot more. And if we try and connect with the ancient past, our rishis were in a certain fashion, they trained themselves so that they would live a very minimalistic life. They practice self-restraint, they practice meditation, by which they would able to control their actions, and the students would see their rishis as a role model, and then they would try to imbibe the kind of learnings that they were able to practice in their long course. So it was more of a lifelong learning for them. So that's it from my end. Thanks a lot.